Let me say something most people are afraid to admit. Sometimes the person who feels the deepest love for you is the same person creating the distance. Not because they don't care, but because caring exposed parts of them they were never prepared to face. If one person keeps living in your thought, if silence replaced connection without a real ending, this isn't coincidence. It's unfinished emotional business, and it has nothing to do with your worth. Listen carefully. This message isn't about hope, it's about truth. Love is not always the soft, glowing feeling people describe in movies. Sometimes love is heavy. Sometimes love is loud in the mind and silent in the mouth. And sometimes love is so intense that it becomes terrifying. When someone truly loves you, they don't just feel affection. They feel exposure. You become a mirror. You reflect the parts of them they have avoided for years. You reflect the part of them that still believes they are unworthy. You reflect the part of them that has been hurt, betrayed, or abandoned before. That reflection can be painful. So the truth is, love can trigger fear instead of action. This is the reason many people pull away from the one person they actually care about. It's not because they don't love you, it's because they do, and that love awakens something inside them that they don't know how to handle. Let me explain. When someone loves you, they begin to imagine the future. They imagine closeness, trust, vulnerability, and commitment. They imagine you as a constant presence in their life, and suddenly they are forced to confront a terrifying thought. What if I can't keep you? What if I lose you? What if I'm not enough? That fear is not irrational. It is a natural response for someone who has been hurt before. If they have experienced betrayal, abandonment, or emotional trauma, their nervous system has been trained to see love as a risk. And love is a risk. It requires opening the heart and stepping into uncertainty. It requires giving someone the power to hurt you. It requires trusting someone with your emotional safety. For some people, that kind of vulnerability is too much. So instead of stepping forward, they step back. Distance becomes their protection. They think if they keep you at a safe emotional distance, they won't have to feel the pain of losing you. They think if they stay silent, they won't have to face the fear of failing you. They think if they avoid the truth will avoid them, but avoidance never works because the love is still there. It doesn't disappear just because they refuse to speak. It doesn't vanish just because they stop texting. It stays alive in the quiet moments. It stays alive in the late night thoughts. It stays alive in the small memories they can't stop replaying. And this is where the pain becomes confusing. You feel like you are being rejected. You feel like you are being forgotten. You feel like you are being replaced. But the truth is the opposite. They are not leaving because they love you less. They are leaving because they love you too much to risk losing you. That may sound strange, but it's true. When love becomes a mirror, it forces a person to see their own wounds. It forces them to recognize how much they have been running. It forces them to admit that they are not ready for the kind of connection they desire. And that admission is unbearable. So they choose silence. They choose distance. They choose the illusion of safety because it feels safer to protect themselves than to face the possibility of failure. And the worst part is they don't always know they are doing it. They might not even realize the full extent of their fear. They might tell themselves they need time. They might tell themselves they are busy. They might tell themselves they want space. But deep down, they are running from the truth that love demands: growth. And growth is scary. Growth requires leaving old patterns behind. It requires stepping out of comfort zones. It requires changing habits and becoming a person who can show up consistently. That is why love can trigger fear instead of action, because love is not just a feeling. It is a responsibility, and not everyone is ready to carry that responsibility. So if you find yourself thinking about someone who has pulled away, remember this. The distance is not always a sign you are unworthy. Sometimes the distance is a sign that someone is too afraid of their own love. And when love is too powerful to be handled, it becomes silent. It becomes avoidance. It becomes a gap. But that gap is not the end. It is a warning. It is a signal that the person you love is not ready to meet you in the place your heart is already standing. And until they are ready, the only thing you can do is protect your own heart and refuse to shrink to make someone else feel safe. Because the moment you stop chasing someone who fears their own love, you become unstoppable. And that is when the truth finally shows itself. Love can trigger fear, but fear cannot survive your growth. When someone you love pulls away, the instinct is to interpret it as rejection. Your mind immediately creates a story. They don't care. They found someone else. They never loved me. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if the distance is not a sign that their love is gone, but that their love is too strong to handle? The truth is, distance is often self-protection, not rejection. Let's break this down. When a person genuinely loves you, they begin to feel a kind of emotional gravity. You start occupying space in their mind, their heart, and their future. And with that comes responsibility. With that comes pressure. With that comes the risk of losing control. If someone has experienced pain before abandonment, betrayal, heartbreak, their brain learns a dangerous lesson. Closeness equals pain. And so when closeness approaches again, their nervous system reacts the way it has been trained. To react, it pulls back, it creates distance, it creates silence, it creates a wall. Because distance feels safer than vulnerability. Now, here's the painful part. This distance isn't usually a conscious decision. They aren't thinking, I want to hurt you. They aren't thinking, I want to make you feel small. They're thinking, if I get too close, I might lose you. If I show my true self, I might be rejected. If I let myself love you fully, I might break. So instead of risking the pain, they choose avoidance. They think if they stay quiet, they won't have to face the fear. They think if they disappear, they won't have to fail you. They think if they keep the distance, they won't have to prove they are worthy. But here's the irony. The distance doesn't protect them. It traps them because the love remains. It doesn't disappear just because they stop communicating. It doesn't vanish just because they avoid you. It stays alive in their thoughts. It stays alive in their memory. It stays alive in the silent moments when they should be asleep but are instead replaying your voice in their head. This is why distance is often the loudest sign of love, not the absence of it, but the fear of it. When someone pulls away, they are not always rejecting you. Sometimes they are ejecting their own capacity to be loved. They are afraid of being exposed. They are afraid of being seen. They are afraid of being vulnerable. And the truth is, vulnerability is terrifying for someone who has been hurt before because vulnerability means the possibility of pain. And pain means they will have to relive their past wounds. So they keep you at arm's length. They keep you in their life as a distant thought. They keep you as a memory they can hold on to with it, risking anything. And that's the most confusing part because it looks like they don't care, but inside they are in constant battle. Their mind is loud. Their heart is heavy. Their silence is not peace. It's chaos. They want you. They love you. They miss you, but they don't trust themselves with your heart. They don't trust themselves to stay consistent. They don't trust themselves to be the person you deserve. So they create distance. They choose to protect themselves from the possibility of failure, and it's painful to watch from the outside. It feels like you're being punished for loving them, but the real truth is they are punishing themselves. They are punishing themselves for their fear. They are punishing themselves for their past. They are punishing themselves for not being ready. Now here's what you need to understand. If someone distances themselves out of fear, you cannot force them to stay. You cannot chase them into healing. You cannot demand consistency from someone who is not emotionally prepared, because healing is not a decision you can pressure into existence. Healing is a process, and the distance is their way of buying time. Sometimes that time turns into growth. Sometimes that time turns into permanent separation. But either way, the distance is not your failure. It is their struggle. And it's not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their readiness. So what should you do? The most powerful move is to protect your own heart. Do not beg for explanations. Do not chase for answers. Do not shrink yourself to make them feel comfortable. Instead, focus on your own growth. Because when you stop chasing, you stop feeding their fear. And when you stop feeding their fear, you become more attractive, not because you are manipulating them, but because you are no longer living. At the level of their avoidance, you are living at the level of your own strength. And that's when the truth becomes clear. Distance is not always rejection. Sometimes it is the only way someone knows how to love without getting hurt. And that is why it is so painful, because they love you, but they don't know how to stay. When someone distances themselves from you, it often feels like the simplest explanation is true. They don't care. They're not interested. They found someone else, but the reality is often more complicated and more heartbreaking. Sometimes the reason they pull away is not because you're not enough. It's because you are too much. Not in the way people use too much to criticize someone, but in the way that your love is real, deep, and worthy, and it scares them. This is the hidden truth. They believe you deserve better than them. Let that sink in. They see your strength. They see your capacity for loyalty. They see your ability to love without condition. And instead of feeling proud, they feel ashamed because they know they are not ready to match that level of love. They don't feel worthy. They don't feel stable. They don't feel consistent. And the moment they see your value, their self-doubt grows like a wildfire. They begin to think, if I stay, I will eventually disappoint you. If I love you fully, I will hurt you. If I commit, I will break you. You deserve someone who can give you everything. This is not humility. This is fear dressed up as virtue. And it is one of the most common reasons people create distance. Because when someone loves you deeply, they also begin to understand what you deserve. And if they don't believe they can be that person, they choose to step back before they can fail you. This is the paradox of love and self-worth. They are not leaving because they don't love you. They are leaving because they do, and they are terrified of the consequences of that love. Now, imagine this scenario. You are standing in front of someone you care about deeply. They look at you with love in their eyes, but their hands are shaking, their heart is open. But their mind is closed. They want to be with you. They want to build something real. They want to stay, but their fear tells them they don't deserve you. And that fear becomes a wall. They start pulling away. They stop calling. They stop texting. They become distant. And you are left wondering what you did wrong. You start questioning your worth. You start doubting your value. But the truth is, they are not leaving because you are unworthy. They are leaving because they are afraid of being unworthy. They're afraid of being exposed. They are afraid of failing you. They are afraid of being seen for who they truly are. And realizing they are not ready, this is why their distance can feel so confusing. Because you can feel their love in the way they remember your voice, the way they remember your laugh, the way they remember your small detail. But their fear prevents them from showing up. They don't want to risk losing you. So they preemptively leave. This is a tragic form of protection. They protect you from being disappointed. They protect themselves from being exposed. But in the process, they still hurt you because love without presence still hurts. Now here's the crucial lesson. When someone distances themselves because they believe you deserve better, it is not your job to prove your worth. You don't need to convince them that you are good enough. You don't need to beg for a chance. You don't need to become smaller to make them feel worthy. Because the moment you start shrinking for someone else, you are no longer honoring your own value. Instead, the most powerful move is to step into your own worth. Live your life with confidence. Love yourself with consistency and refuse to be someone's almost or someday. Because the truth is, you deserve someone who sees your value and chooses to rise to it. Not someone who loves you from distance because they think they are unworthy. If they ever come back, they must come back changed. They must come back with a new understanding of their own worth. And if they don't, you will still win because you will have chosen a love that matches your depth. Because the love you deserve is not the love that requires you to wait. It is the love that chooses you without hesitation. And that is the difference between someone who truly loves you and someone who is simply afraid of losing you. When a relationship ends, most people expect the closure to be obvious. A conversation, a goodbye, a reason, a final message. But sometimes closure never comes. And when closure doesn't arrive, the mind refuses to stop searching. This is the dangerous part of distance. A relationship doesn't end when the conversation stops. It ends when the meaning is resolved. Without that resolution, your brain stays stuck in a loop. Let me explain why. The human mind hates unfinished stories. It hates unresolved emotions. It hates unanswered questions. Our brains are wired to seek completion. When something is left open, our mind continues to replay it over and over again, trying to find an ending that makes sense. This is why you keep thinking about them. This is why their name pops up in your thoughts at random moments. This is why you keep checking your phone, hoping for a message that never comes, because your mind is trying to solve a puzzle that has no solution, and the silence becomes a problem your brain cannot solve. It keeps searching for meaning. It keeps searching for a reason. It keeps searching for the missing piece that will finally let the story end. This is the loop, and it is one of the most painful experiences of emotional attachment. The absence of closure creates a mental pause that never ends. You are left living in the middle of a story, not knowing whether it was meant to continue or end. And this is why distance feels like a trap, because the connection wasn't broken. It was paused. And your heart doesn't understand pause. Your heart only understands presence. When someone is not present, your heart assumes the worst. It begins to create scenarios. It begins to imagine conversations. It begins to build the story of what could have been. And every imagined scenario brings a new wave of emotion, hope, pain, anger, sadness, confusion. This is why you can feel so exhausted, not because you are weak, because your mind is working overtime. Now let's look at what the other person is experiencing while you are stuck in loops. They are also stuck, but their loop is different. They are not stuck in confusion. They are stuck in fear. They know they should reach out. They know they miss you. They know they want you, but their fear keeps them frozen. So they remain silent. They watch from a distance. They wonder if you have moved on. They wonder if you still think about them. They wonder if they have ruined their chance forever. This is why the silence is not peaceful for them. It is noisy. It is heavy. It is full of regret. And they are also trapped in a loop. But their loop is filled with what ifs. This is the hidden truth. The silence is not empty. It is full of emotions. It just doesn't show them openly. Now here is the key lesson you must understand. The lack of closure is not your fault. You did not cause the silence. You did not create the distance. You did not fail. The closure never came because they were not ready to be honest. They were not ready to be vulnerable. They were not ready to face the consequences of love. And because they were not ready, you were left with an incomplete story. But here is the powerful part. You don't need closure to move forward. You only need clarity. And clarity comes from understanding this. Your life does not require someone else's explanation to continue. You are not waiting for a message. You are waiting for your own life to begin again the moment you accept that the story may never be completed. You free yourself from the loop. You stop trying to solve the unsolvable. You stop replaying the same moments. You stop giving your energy to a silence that doesn't deserve it. And this is where your power returns. You start living again. You start breathing again. You start creating again. The closure you need is not from them. It is from you. You need to decide, do I want to live in this pause forever? Or do I want to create my own ending? The truth is, you are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to choose your own happiness. You are allowed to move forward, even if the story remains unfinished, because the mind can loop forever. But the heart only heals when you stop feeding the loop. And that is the real lesson of distance. No closure creates mental loops, but you have the power to break the cycle. When someone distances themselves from you, it feels like you lost control. You think, why won't they reach out? What did I do wrong? What am I missing? You start living in their absence, waiting for them to return. But here's the hidden truth. The moment you stop waiting is the moment the power shifts. This is not about being cruel or indifferent. It's about choosing yourself. Because when you keep waiting, you are giving your energy to a person who isn't ready to receive it. And that makes you vulnerable. It makes you dependent. It makes you available to someone who may not deserve your heart. But when you start growing, when you focus on your life, your goals, your happiness, something changes. You stop chasing. You stop shrinking. You stop begging for attention. You begin to build a life that doesn't rely on their presence. And that is when the power dynamic changes. Now, the person who pulled away begging, and is to feel something they never expected. They feel the weight of loss. They feel the emptiness of their own distance. They begin to notice that your absence isn't just silence. It's a new reality. And that reality is frightening. Because for the first time, they realize she's not waiting anymore. He's not chasing anymore. They've moved on. This is the moment the fear becomes real. They used to have control because you were emotionally available. You were still there. You were still hoping. You were still waiting. But now you are not. Now you are living. Now you are thriving. Now you are building a life that doesn't revolve around their decisions. And that is when they start to feel the real consequence of their silence. They begin to understand that they didn't just create distance, they created a void. And that void is not easy to fill. They may try to fill it with distractions, work, other people, busyness, but it doesn't work because the connection you had was real, it was meaningful, and it was rare. They begin to feel the pull of your absence, not just emotionally, but spiritually. They start to understand that the person they left behind was not weak. You were strong. You were resilient. You were brave enough to love without losing yourself. And that is the most dangerous thing for someone who fears commitment, because it reminds them of what they avoided. Now, here's the crucial part. Your growth doesn't just change your life. It changes the connection itself. It changes the energy. It changes the story. Because when you stop waiting, you stop feeding the fear that kept them away. They were afraid of your persistence. They were afraid of your dependency. They were afraid of your love being too strong. And now, when you become self-sufficient, you remove the fuel from the ire fear. You show them what it looks like to be whole. And that is when they must decide, do they want to come back as the person who left? Or do they want to come back as someone who has changed? Because your growth raises the standard, you are no longer available for half effort. You are no longer accepting excuses. You are no longer willing to wait for someone to become ready. And that is the power of self-respect. You stop living in the past. You stop trying to fix someone who isn't ready to be fixed. You stop allowing someone else's fear to control your happiness. Now, this doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop sacrificing yourself. You can still love them, but you will not let that love keep you stuck. And if they come back, they will have to meet you at your new level, not your old one, because the person you are becoming is not the same person who waited. And that is the ultimate transformation. The distance was not meant to break you. It was meant to strengthen you. It was meant to show you your own power. And once you realize that, you understand the final truth. Your growth is the most powerful force in the connection. It changes the dynamic, it changes the story, and it determines whether they return or whether you finally let them go. Here's the part most people misunderstand. Love alone does not create closeness. Emotional safety does when someone carries unresolved pain. Love becomes pressure. Connection feels like respo. Instability and responsibility feels like risk. So they hesitate. They disappear. They convince themselves silence is kindness. But silence isn't peace. It's avoidance. While you're questioning what you did wrong, they're questioning whether they are enough. Their mind is loud at night. They replay moments. They imagine conversation they were too afraid to have. They miss you quietly because admitting it would mean facing themselves. And here's the most uncomfortable truth. You didn't scare them away by being too much. You scared them because you were real. Real love demands growth. Real connection exposes inconsistency. And not everyone is ready to be seen clearly. That's why chasing answers never works. Pressure amplifies fear. Demanding clarity from someone who avoids themselves only pushes them deeper into hiding. Now let's talk about you. The reason you can't let go isn't weakness. It's intuition recognizing unfinished emotional energy. But here's where the lesson flips. The silence one, meant to trap you. It was meant to return you to yourself, because the moment you stop shrinking, the moment you stop waiting for permission to live, the moment your happiness no longer depends on their courage, everything shifts. You stop vibrating at the frequency of their fear and rise into self-respect. That's when one of two things happens. They find the courage to meet you fully, or they fade because they were never meant to walk at your new level. Both outcomes are victories. Here is the truth you needed to hear. Someone can love you deeply and still not be ready to stay. That pain is real, but it is not your fault. You were never meant to beg someone into bravery. You were never meant to dim your depth, to make someone feel safe. And you were never meant to wait forever in silence. Distance was not punishment. It was preparation. If they return, it will be because fear lost its grip. If they don't, it's because your life was meant to open in a bigger direction. Either way, you in the moment you choose yourself. Because the love meant for you will never need distance to survive. It will meet you openly, consistently, and without fear. And that chapter is already beginning.